Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 Leaders in Trade Compliance. Right now we're live, and today I have Karthik Naren with you. He's a Trade Compliance Manager with EY. Um, for everyone who's watching, thank you so much for watching now or later on. I know a lot of people watch the stuff later on as well, so if you haven't subscribed, don't forget to subscribe on my YouTube channel. And I hope you can find this information somewhat beneficial to you, whether you're in the US, whether you're anywhere in North America, or even somewhere else. So today I have a Karthik with me, and I'm going to hand it over to Karthik so he can introduce himself to you, what he does, where he is, and what his daily life looks like. Karthik, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Nadeem. Hi, everyone. It's Karthik here. I right now work with Ernst Young as a location leader for trade compliance for India, Bangalore region. I mostly take care of classification, export compliance, and most of the global trade work. What you people look at it, and I'm basically from the Detroit of India, call it Chennai. But right now I'm situated in the Silicon Valley of India in Bangalore. Uh, Moved here 5 years back.
Karthik, sorry to cut in. Do you wanna uh, do you
Yeah,
want to tell us what the Detroit of India is and what the Silicon Valley is?
sure, sure, definitely.
When you told me that description, I was pretty interested in the way you described
Yeah.
everything.
So let me. Yeah, that's really interesting. Let me give a quick background on why we call it the Detroit of India. So Chennai, sometime back was called as Madras. It has a really big port where there's used to be a lot of import export happening, and it
Mhm.
was really a good place for a lot of automotive manufacturers like Ford, Yamaha, a lot of manufacturers. I think Nissan, Renault, and a couple of more small scale manufacturers, mostly component as well, and also car manufacturers where they wanted to have Chennai as a hub in terms of the proximity what they have with the port. So it started growing out to more be like an automotive hub. So we call it as the Detroit of India. We have a lot of automotive manufacturers here. Bangalore,
Mhm.
why we call it a Silicon Valley of India is it's like we have the IT hub. This is where 40% of the R&D happens. We have a lot of IT companies, people working on IT software jobs. We have some manufacturing hubs as well, but this is mostly where all the IT comes from. So that's the reason why we call Bangalore as a Silicon Valley of India. So just a quick background on why why we call it this way, so that people from the states understand it much better.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I know. I can tell, especially if they haven't been to India
yeah,
themselves. It's easier for them to comprehend what you're talking about, where you're living geographically, I guess.
yeah. Thanks,
Mhm.
Nadeem, for that. So I moved to Bangalore 5 years back to start working with Sandler, and then later moved on to EY to take up the role as manager on the trade compliance front. Overall, I have around 10 plus years of global trade experience, mostly predominantly working on the auto industry, heavy machinery, but worked on. I think I classified more than I think around 200,000 products with variety of footprint with all the different industries, and probably reviewed much more than that. So that's a
Wow.
basic introduction what I can give something about myself.
Nice, 200,000 products you've classified them. Wow. How long does it take to classify that much stuff?
It depends. So I'll probably walk you through some of the journey where I started. So it all started in 2012 when Nissan was looking out for some of the engineers where whom they want to cross train on trade compliance front. Before that, even though I was part of supply chain and knew a little bit about trade compliance, but I was not completely into the global trade. So that is the time when Nissan actually was setting up the team and they were looking out for engineers. So kind of got selected out there, and kind of they specifically sent a couple of batch of us to their Nissan North American headquarters to get us trained on trade compliance front, and then we came back and then we hired a little bit more people and then started training them, started learning with them, setting up the team. Again good amount of exposure. That was my starting point in my career, and then slowly moved on to Sandler. So Sandler was setting up an office in India. They wanted to expand their business operations across the globe, and they were looking up to set up an office in Bangalore. And they had a very small team, and they want to expand more onto classification.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I moved from the manufacturing industry to more a service based industry. That was really a big jump.
Oh.
And once when I joined Sandler, there were tremendous amount of things what I could learn in terms of a holistic picture on global trade, not just focused around classification, but it was more on ECCN, the export control, and then a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
FTA, the origin, the post in the pre-entry audits, and some of the things what they all do. We were pretty much very focused on classification in a sense. So this that
Mm-hmm.
was a big transformation, and that also in terms of looking at products, like they had a huge customer base with different industries onto them. So that was really good to have that kind of exposure, and not
Mm-hmm.
just focusing more on automotive. It was widespread database,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much after that in 2018, got an opportunity where EY was setting up their center of excellence, and that's when I got moved on to there. Pretty much it's very similar to what Sandler does. We kind of like have different industries where we cater to, and look about
Mm-hmm.
a lot of products, and I must say that every day is really interesting in this, because you get so many different products from so many different industries,
Mm-hmm.
and you never get bored.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
yeah.
So you
So
deal with the different type of products, right? Or is how does your day look like? So when you go in, is it like every single day you deal with the same type of product, same type of industry, or do you yourself deal with the very different depending on I guess the customer? Do you deal with different types of products every single day depending on what's needed?
yeah, so it depends. It actually depends. So but definitely there's not been a single day where I've never done repeated stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We although get some of the things where we might probably use the same HTS, but it has been always a lot of products where we analyze new each day, learn new about new products, new headings each day, looking at
Mm-hmm.
different section notes, looking at different chapter notes. It's really good, and since the technology is evolving, we get a lot of new type of products. And always I used to think they probably need to, instead of updating the WCO tariff every 5 years, they
Mm-hmm.
probably need to do it every 3 years, because at the rate at which the technology is running so fast. So I think they might have to probably start looking at updating the tariff every 3 years instead of 5 years, because there are so many new products coming in, and I've always been thinking tariff has been always caught up with the technology. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something really fascinating about this kind of work.
Yeah, and it's like I feel like nowadays the technology and even the tariff classification and the duty rate and stuff like that, even if we just talk about duty rate nowadays, it's changing so rapidly and much faster than it was before. Before it was kind of like everything was slowed down, everything was in the background, but in the past 4 years or so, it feels like there's something new every single day, something different every single day, and there's something that you need to learn every single day, whether it's just within classification or it's within export control. It's something new every single day.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Nadeem. Especially
Mm-hmm.
in the automotive front, when probably I used to start working on classification, electric vehicles were there, but they were in limited numbers, and the technology was very limited. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, where the world is moving towards complete electric vehicles, I think the IC engines are going to be the thing of the past, and there's going to be so much new powertrain coming up. There are a lot of complex powertrains coming up with complex configurations, different drivetrains coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and different types of motors coupled with them. So these are some of the areas I think, and also not just these. There are also complex things associated with the manufacturing of the whole component. So back on those days, we just have gaskets, which probably could be made up of multiple layers of sheet metals, and
Mm-hmm.
those were supposed to be the most complex one. Right now, we have composite gaskets made up of asphalt, graphite, mixture of multiple material. So need to determine what percentage is that and how it goes. Need to see whether it's excluded from particular heading. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to keep ourselves updated. So that's really something what we need to keep ourselves updated each and every time when the technology grows. And we also kind of and that's the most interesting part of this kind of work.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like you know how you described the complexity of classification based on the product. I feel like the complexity is understood by the people that classify, but it seems like everyone else, engineering, IT, or everyone else who doesn't actually classify, they don't understand the complete complexity of what a classification is, what's needed for it. To them, it's kind of like they give a basic information and you classify. That's not how it works, especially if you want a good audit, especially if you want to make sure that whatever you're classifying, it's something that stands in the future. For example, when customs of any country comes after you and they ask you why did you classify something, you have to have a good reason for why you did it. And if you don't have an audit trail, if you just kind of um, you know just don't do the complete responsible thing that you need to do before you classify the stuff, it's going to come and bite you back.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you. So it's not necessarily to be really a complex article in order to actually require a lot of information or to gather the information. The simplest of things, something like a nut or a bolt, especially the apparels and the shoes, these are really
Mm-hmm.
complex. The breakdowns are really complex. You need a lot of
Yeah.
ton of information, especially in terms of shoes and apparels, where we need to know how the stitching is being made, what are the in case of
Mhm,
shoes, you need to know what are the layers it's been made up of, what is the top sole, what is the bottom sole,
mhm,
and we need to have the right set of questions. So some of the times for the customer or the client, for them it's just like, okay, it's shoe, it cannot be complex, it's just a shirt, or it's
yeah,
just an apparel. How complex it can be? It's not rocket science, or it's not a complex machinery which is heavy.
yeah,
It's just like, but
yeah,
the breakdown which runs behind, which determines the duty. One, it's going to be a good cost saving for them if they're going to classify it properly, and that's something what I want to talk a little bit more about
mm,
later. And the second, it's being more compliant, to provide
yeah,
the right set of data. So even though it could be a simplest of the simple product, it could need a lot of information for getting it right. So it need not be really as complex as I just told before, like a composite machine
mhm,
or a
yeah,
complex product. Yeah.
and it's probably harder to classify a shirt than it is to classify $1 million machine that does something. You know, that's that's
100%
that,
agree.
that that's what sometimes people who need the HTS code don't understand. That sometimes we can classify $1 million machine very easily in less than a second. On the other hand, if it's like a shoe or a textile item, that might take us an hour to classify because it just needs that much detail. So it's not based on the value of the value of the item. It's based on
Yeah.
what goes into making the product or what the function is.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So, from the customer's perspective, they look at it in such a way where $1 million product, and I pay X dollars for the classification, and it's a $30 shoe or a $40 shoe, and still you're going to charge us more than that. So, why is it like I'm being probably charged like the same, or why I'm being charged like really high for a
When
low
they
product?
when they ask you that, do you show them the big book?
Yeah, so what I tell them is usually one, yeah, is that the big book, and then uh, see, the $1 million product is probably going to be exported once in a year or probably twice in a year. It's
Hmm.
it's not a high volume item, but in terms of shoes and apparels and t-shirts, they're going to have different sizes, different shades, and different colors. However, the
Hmm.
composition, that's not going to matter to customs. So if they're going to
Hmm.
have like even like 1,000 models based upon the same architecture what they're going to have for an apparel or
Hmm.
for a shoe, we are going to expand the same. If we know for a matter of fact that it's just going to be the size and color which is going to be
Yeah, I
different.
think you're on mute. I can't hear you, Karthik.
I'm sorry. Are you able to hear me now?
Let me check if it's my headphone or yours.
I can hear you actually. Are you able to hear me?
My headphone seems to be working fine.
Oh,
I
I
can
can
hear
hear
you,
you.
Karthik. Let me try to reach Karthik and see where he is.
Uh,
I think it's saying that it's picking up your voice, but it's not coming through for some reason. Okay. Wow. Karthik can hear me, but I can't hear him. I
uh,
wonder why. Let me try on another headphone. I don't think it's mine because this one is working, but let me try on
let
something
me
else
also
as
try
well.
with a let me also try with a different headphone. Are you able to hear me now?
Can you hear me now, Karthik?
I can hear you.
Okay. Maybe it was my headphone. That's so weird. It just cut off for some reason. Okay.
Oh, no issues, no issues. So coming back to the topic. So whenever like the clients ask for something like why do I get charged charged the same or maybe more for classifying the
Mm-hmm.
you charge the same for classifying $1 million product and the same for a shoe. They come back and ask like, why do we get that? So one, we show the big book. The second is that there's going to be the volume is what going to make the big difference. So
Mm-hmm.
for shoes or apparel where they're going to make on different sizes and different colors, and the basic architecture is going to be the same, then it's going to be like 1,000 products. We can probably give them the classification as quickly, and that's what is going to help them, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where they actually have the cost arbitrage advantage rather than a huge product being shipped with just once or
Mm-hmm.
twice. So that's basically how the industry needs to look at it, rather than actually looking at the fact that why it's so complex and why it's taking so much time, and why people come back with so much questions on them to arrive at it.
Yeah. So they have to consider both the quantity and how complex it is and what architecture it. Depending on what you're trying to classify, the classification can be very simple or very hard. It has nothing to do with the fact of how much the item is worth or how much the volume is. It's
Yeah.
just depends how constant they import it and what it is, honestly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I can also give you like one example is where the client probably when they actually look at the classification, they don't actually look at the language what the customs speak. So I can give you a classic example in the past where we have always seen is that for the customer, when they look at a as simple product as o-ring, they look at it as a rubber o-ring, and then they even go back to the engineering, and then they say like, yeah, it's just rubber. But
Mhm.
when you actually when we inspect it, and then when we actually really deep dive onto it, and then look at the composition, does not really meet the note 4 to chapter 40. And that's when where actually we need to look at the real composition. White-on is a very classic case. White-on, it looks like rubber, feels like rubber. When
Mhm.
you actually look at it, you could probably even say that it's a rubber ring, but actually it does not meet the note 4 to chapter 40, so it needs to be classified as a plastic o-ring in 39. So that's
Yeah.
going to make a huge difference in the duty rates, and that's completely changing the chapter, the first two digits. So we need they actually need to look at it, these products where uh, to see in the how custom sees it in the language of customs, mostly, and especially sometimes even their engineering team could not know the fact, because they probably will not know the fact, what is it going to matter for someone if it's going to be different. But
Mhm.
in terms of duty rate, that's going to matter a lot. So I think that's the area where people have to really look into it, and that's also where it gets really interesting to look at products and then see how differently they get, even when the simplest of notes doesn't they don't meet the simplest of notes. So that's something where I think people should put a lot of focus on.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of people don't realize that the customs definition of what the chemical is, or what the item is, doesn't have to be what they generally know the stuff as. It's kind of like chemistry is a different language.
Yeah.
Just like there are different languages, Hindi, English, Spanish. It's the customs has their own language, and
Hmm.
they need to realize that when someone classifies the stuff, it needs to be based on the language which customs agrees on. It doesn't matter what you call it, or if you call it rubber or plastic, it doesn't matter. It has to meet a very specific definition of
Hmm.
what the plastic is or what the rubber is. And that's a really good example of Iton. You said silicone. These are the kind of things where we, as someone who classifies the product, we need to realize what the chemical actually is that makes up the product, and that can change the
Yeah.
duty a lot. Like you said, it can go from 0 to 25%. It can go anywhere.
Absolutely.
So it's very essential that you get the classification right, and that you pay the duty based on the correct classification. Because if you mess up, it's gonna become a liability for you in the future.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you.
Mhm.
And sorry, go ahead, Nadeem.
Now, go ahead.
Also, like what I've seen in the past with some of my clients, or some of the way people think when I meet them, is that their perspective to look at products are really different. So for them, when you call something like an ADP or an automatic data processing machine, it's just the laptops and the desktops. But the fact is that even a small developer board containing a processing unit which can be programmed and probably have a memory onto it can also be looked upon if it meets the definition of an ADP described by custom. So
Hmm.
when they need to look at those definitions which qualifies a certain product to a different way rather than our usual perspective of looking at products on day-to-day life. So that is also
Hmm.
something which I really felt
Yeah.
that the perspective of what we see it's totally different.
I agree with you, and I feel like a lot of people have difficulties classifying um, electrical stuff, textile stuff, and chemicals. So they don't really fully understand what the customs definition of these things is, or what the customs definition of each single HTS code is. And that's where the specialist comes in, whether it's you, whether it's me, whether it's someone else, whoever's trying to classify
Yeah.
stuff. You need to give them the information that they're asking you, not what you want to give them.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So Karthik, we'll talk about more about tariff in a bit. When we began, you mentioned how you jumped from manufacturing to more toward the services side of things. So what
Yeah.
made you do that at that time?
Yeah. So at that point of time, I what made me move from manufacturing to the service industry was one, I wanted to explore more options into trade compliance
Hmm.
rather than more focusing just on classification, and that is one point. And another point was I wanted to also look at various different products like
Hmm.
chemicals, the apparel, aerospace, communication, etc., where there could be even more complex products and interesting things what we could see. Definitely, automotive is a vast ocean where you could get a lot of new products, and definitely not even a day was boring for me. But still, I thought I need more fuel. So I thought that would be really good if I move to a service industry where I could get on, do a lot of things. Probably there could be more industries, more products where we can do a lot of ruling write-ups, technical
Hmm.
write-ups. So that was the biggest reason why I wanted to move from switch over from a single manufacturing industry to a very diversified service industry where I could handle multiple clients.
I get you. When I was moving through my career, usually the reason for my move in the past was because I wanted to do more and I wanted to explore more because it's good if you keep on doing the same thing or same, I guess, category of product. But as for some people like you and me, we wanna explore more. We want to do more, as much more than we're doing
Yeah.
right now, and that makes us kind of push forward and do more. So when you transitioned from like your first job to second to third, um, what do you feel like are some of the skills that made you succeed? Because not everyone who wants to move from, for example, engineering to a services portion, or from a analyst to a senior
Mhm.
analyst or manager, they're able to do that. So, what are
Mhm.
some of the things which some of the skills, I guess, hard skills or soft skills, which you had, which you feel like benefited you and made you succeed in this field?
Sure, sure. Thanks. That's really a great question, Nadeem. So, a couple of things here. So, one is when basically in trade compliance, especially, I would probably focus on classification. Is something like you might not be familiar with some of the industries, but you should really have a good reading process where you'll be able to understand some of the rulings and some of the technical literatures and some of the legal notes put up by either the country or the WCO. So those are the important facts, which I think that's the foremost important. You should really have the mindset to learn new products, even though there might not be of your background or completely new to you. Going through some of the technical literatures, going through some of the rulings, reading a lot of it. Some of and one major uh, thing which I followed personally is I used to go through a lot of rulings, even though they
Mm-hmm.
might not be for a particular product. I used to go through a lot of good rulings, especially the HQ ones where they have clearly described or they have detailed out very clearly on the law and analysis, how they looked at the product and what are the different headings they looked at, and very specifically the reason why they went to a particular heading, and the more important is why they did not choose a particular heading. So and that learning we should probably implement to our whatever products we get. We might not have similar rulings or for similar products, but using an applied logic and going through some of these rulings and understanding how customs tend to lean towards some of their products. It could be for a completely different product, but based
Mm-hmm.
on how they lean towards it is how we kind of implement it. So that's I think a very basic thing I would say people should probably do if they are looking at some of the career options and moving up the ladder. So i
Mm-hmm.
used to I used to always coordinate with people and then look at things differently on how they look at it, and then maybe brainstorm and see how they think about a certain product or how they think about a certain classification. So that's kind of where you get different perspective, and then that's something that's really great. And when you actually move up a ladder, when you start reviewing or when you start interacting with the client, that's where when you actually can potentially give them something back by saying like how people differently think about it. Each one
Mm-hmm.
thinks about it, so
Mm-hmm.
not just your perspective. And always like you might probably lean towards something having a different perspective, and having someone look at it and then giving their perspective is always really good. And that would make you actually help you look at products differently. That has helped us a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say finally, I would say teaming up, and especially in terms of soft skills, I would say some of the tools like Access, Advanced Excel are really helpful in handling large databases, especially. So some of them, going through some of them is really good.
Okay, so it's pretty much the first thing you said was you need to be the kind of person who wants to learn more and show more, and somehow you need to, I guess, you need to also be able to show that you're a passionate person about trade compliance to the people around you and upper management, so they see that and they know that you want to succeed where you are.
Yeah.
And the second thing would be communication. You want to make sure that you're communicating everything, everything that you know, everything you learn, and everything you do. That's going to be really helpful. And besides that, it's kind of dealing with different types of data, whether it's Excel or Access. That's these are three of the main things which you feel like that people who want to move forward, they need to actually do this. And I feel like you're right on these things. I feel like overall, though, at least in trade compliance, I'm sure it's true about other careers as well. Communication is essential. Whatever you do, it's not about just doing and producing the results. You should be able to show those results to people around you, at least your upper management. If you're doing a lot, but for some reason the upper management isn't seeing what you're doing, they won't know you're doing that, and that's not going to help you in the long run, right? So you need to be
Yeah.
able to just do stuff, and you need to be able to communicate and show what you're doing as well, and that kind of helps you move forward in your career, whether it's trade compliance or whether it's something else that's very basic to to succeeding pretty much.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and I completely agree with you in terms of communication. That's something it's very plays a very pivotal role, right from the analyst to a senior leadership role in trade compliance, especially when you're an analyst asking the right set of questions, and then when you're moving up the ladder. Uh, Telling the importance of the compliance and what could be the output if they have good compliance. So everywhere communication plays a really important role.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I completely agree. And in terms of technology, soft skills, learning tools, I think the Access, Excel are pretty much basics. But again, like how the technology evolves for the classification, it's also for the trade compliance. So we should also move up things like Power BI. Tableau. So these are some of the great analytical tools where we can project some of the client data in a more easier manner for the client to understand on what their global footprint is and where their products are going and what are the
Mm-hmm.
FTAs they can use and things like that.
Okay. And if let's say you're hiring someone tomorrow, what kind of qualities do you look for in them? What kind of question do you ask them, and what do you expect them to already know for them to be a good candidate who you might hire? Whether I guess we can talk about two people. One who doesn't have a trade compliance experience before, so they want to enter into this field, and the other end, someone who's already in the field. So, what are the some of the different skills you see in both of them?
Sure. So let's probably start with someone who might be a fresher, who's new to trade compliance. I think that what I look forward in a particular skill sets, basic skill set, what generally we look forward when we look for hiring is um, basic logics, day-to-day stuff logics, which they need to have really application of logics. So that is really important what we look for. And then a flair to learn more and then communicate, read more things, reading a lot of things, because most of the time we read a lot of things. So they need to be really
Mm-hmm.
patient and going through a lot of rulings and a lot of technical literature to understand the product. So that's something which is very fundamental. We look forward,
So,
and of
so,
course,
so commitment, how committed they are to the field. That's pretty much it, right?
yeah, that's exactly, yeah. So
Okay.
and if they are coming from have a specific skill set and how technically they are sound they are in a particular field, so that probably they might be to just see how knowledgeable they are in their particular field. So these are the three main important things probably look out for freshers. So and I think the reason why I can confidently say these are the important things because they're going to do that when they join, and that's going to be probably the rest of their life what they're going to do. Or that's going to be pretty much an ongoing process in trade compliance. Is you get a lot of updates, you get a lot of new rulings. So every time you have to keep reading, even though you might be 10, 15, 20 years experienced on trade compliance, you might have to go through a lot of things each year. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something what the commitment what they should look at. And when it comes to someone who's been already working on it, probably the basic things what I ask them is how have they what are the most difficult things they have handled in the trade compliance world, especially if it's going to be classification or ECCN. What are the most difficult ones they have seen? And probably I would ask some of the general rules of interpretation, not the ones being given by the CBP, but what they have actually faced in their real life. So usually people try to pick up. When I ask them an example for 2A, they used to say a cycle without a seat. So that's the most common thing. But usually I ask them like what they have gone through, what products they have actually seen them uh, actually when they do the classification. So some examples from there, and of course. Also ask them how do they generally handle some disputes, something like a CF29 or a CF28. So how do they respond to it, or how do they look upon it, and basically have done any ruling write-ups or any technical write-ups. So this probably could mean that we could see how much in depth they have gone and taken it up seriously, and
Mm-hmm.
also level of expertise what they have. So I think these are some of the things what potentially I would see in an experienced professional.
Okay. And do you look for any certification, whether it's in North America or whether it's in India? Do you look for any type of certification, and does that help you determine, I guess, first, if there's someone new in the field and they had some kind of certification, do you kind of give them more value? And what about someone who has experience and certification? Does the certification help kind of give them an edge?
Yeah, definitely. It's slightly different in India than US. So in US, definitely having an LCB makes a lot of difference. It definitely improves the visibility of what you have when you actually apply for a job, and that's definitely an edge over it. But India, we have a broker similar broker license, but it's kind of more to do not towards it's a little bit towards compliance, but more towards brokering work where to clear shipments. So it's not equivalent of what you actually have in the US. So and not many people also have it here, and it's not probably mandatory if you're going to probably look into working into a compliance world. But definitely it's a big advantage. But it's not very common here to
Hmm.
have people in the trade compliance world having a broker license.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Um, so now I want to kind of jump back to the tariff classification that we were talking about. I know you do a lot of classification on your side, and can you help us and the audience understand what tariff engineering is? Is it something that's legal? Do people do it? What is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of you have to take it with a pinch of salt. So it is tariff engineering is a great way to look at how to do some cost saving, duty savings, but legally. So some of the examples, industry examples. So one thing what the industry needs to look at it is definitely they can look into tariff engineering, but they need to make the change and not basically remove it or dismantle it once it's been shipped, okay, or once it reaches the destination. So for example, some of the common examples of tariff engineering and how useful it is um, a famous clothing manufacturer has a pocket, a small pocket below the waistline. So that
Mm-hmm.
gives them a edge of duty to a certain percentage, and it also makes them more fashionable. So that's how the company needs to look at these tariff engineering, where they can make their products better. At the same time, they can also leverage the tax advantage what they have towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So these are I think another example is again a shoe manufacturer, famous shoe manufacturer, where they actually added different layers of felt to make it more like a slipper rather than a shoe, which gives them an edge over, and also it makes the people who wear it more comfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
and that also gives them a lot of advantage over duty. So I think this is where the manufacturing industry and people should look at it to see how it can be advantageous in both the ways, where it can make the product better and also at the same time have some tax implication
Mm-hmm.
where they can save some duty. But definitely, tariff engineering is a really good tool where industry can look at their existing products or their new products under development to give them a little bit an edge over to see whether they can utilize some of the cost benefit what the each of the governments gives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, you're right. And for anyone who's watching or who will watch, just know that tariff engineering it's a legal way of handling tariff duties. So it can go both. It can be in two ways. One, depending on you kind of adjust your manufacturing based on how much duty you're going to be end up paying for the product you're going to ship into a country. Or two, you can change your product to fit a certain definition that's going to fall under certain duty for customs. So either way, you're going to be doing something that's legal, and it's not something you're going to get in trouble for, because you're pretty much saying and watching what US Customs says. For example, you know the laws, and you kind of manufacture, make your product to fit into that HTS classification. So that way you might not have to pay as much duty as you might otherwise have to. So it's something that's totally legal and legible. It's something you can do. And as someone who, whether it's on the manufacturing side of things, whether you work with a consultant, if you can understand what's going to make your products fall under a less duty rate, it's totally fine, and it's something that's very doable.
Yeah. That's very precise. Yeah, and I
Mhm.
think the industry should also take advantage of some of the benefits what the governments are giving for certain tariff, to see whether that can be utilized. And yeah, it's a really great way, and it's a legal way where they can look at reducing the overall cost of the product, the landed cost of the product when it actually gets shipped.
And it can help the companies a lot. Sometimes the duty rate would go from like 5.9% to 0%. And
Yeah,
to you or me, it might not seem like a lot because we don't buy products. But if a company is a multi-billion-dollar company and they're importing the same product, for example, throughout the year, and the duties are going to be end up being millions of dollars, then they can actually make an impact on how much they pay and how much savings they have overall for the company. And it's a very effective way. If you have the right people, you can actually make a difference.
yeah, yeah. Totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. Yep. So Karthik, what kind of advice would you give to people who wanna enter into this field, or who um, want to continue this field, and even the people who are thinking of quitting this field? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think global trade is really a great place. It's going to get more complex. It's going to get more, I would say, in a way, difficult for some of the companies to actually look at some of these rules and regulations being put forward in different ways. So there are a lot of things, not just classification. You have free trade agreement. You have the origin analysis. You have the restricted party screening. So there are a lot of avenues where you could potentially make your career grow really big. And I think it's just a great place, especially now, to be on global trade, and really start a career, because with a lot of trade wars happening around the world, where a lot of big organizations are looking at to shifting some of their bases, manufacturing, back and forth into different countries. I think this is kind of the great place to be there, especially now. And it's not going to definitely stop, or it's not going to definitely get weakened. It's going to get more stronger with more tougher taxation and tougher regulations coming in. So I think people who are looking forward to make global trade as a career, it's going to be really wonderful. And
Hmm.
people who are already there, I think it's really a best time. It will be the best time in their career, and it's going to get better for them, honestly.
I totally agree with you, especially for the kind of people who don't want to get bored or who don't want to do the same thing every single day. It's a great field. Um, excuse me. Because it involves everything and everyone. If you're in trade compliance, as I always say, you kind of deal with within the company. You're going to be dealing with legal, with purchasing, with IT, with HR. You will deal with all different kind of department. And depending on what you do, you can choose to, for example, do one thing, two thing, or you can be involved in everything from classification to evaluation to um, FTAs or reconciliation. You can do everything. This field has a lot, and it's all out there for you to grab. So if you want to be in this field, if you want to continue your career, it's an amazing field. And for the people who are thinking of leaving it, honestly, just it's whatever makes you happy. But it's a field where you can find a lot of potential. If you really want to grow, if you really want to succeed, and that's your goal, then you can really find out a lot about this field and actually go dive into one thing or 10 things. It's going to be your choice.
Definitely, totally agree. Yeah, yeah, and I think that if you really, if you are one of the folks who really wants to see new things every day, to be really honest, in this 10 plus years of experience in global trade, not a single day I ever felt bored, or I have never been a single day where I've not seen a new classification. So it has been always exciting, and it was always been really, I would say, uh, a great career ever since the day one, which I've been. So, and especially if you are really looking at learning new things, and looking at new products, and learning them, looking at literatures, I think global trade is really a great option.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Um, so for anyone who's watching, if you want any more opinion or anything, if you want to reach out to Karthik, feel free to do so. He's on LinkedIn, and I'm sure he doesn't mind if you reach out for opinion, or if you just want to know some general information about what he does, or if you have something for him. He's there, so you can reach out to him. And Karthik, thank you so much for being on air today. I really appreciate it. I know it was very early morning for you in India, so thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you spent today with me and with the audience. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this beneficial. And when I say a lot of people, I don't mean just like people in the US. I'm also talking about people, for example, in India, because like I mentioned before, I do have people even in India reaching out to me because they want to find out about this field. So it's going to be a lot of beneficial information for them and even big companies inside the US or in North America who import stuff. So what you mentioned about the career, about the field, and overall about tariff engineering, it's a lot of useful information that if companies have the right people to implement it, then they can actually save a lot of money as well.
Absolutely, and thanks, Nadeem, for this great opportunity. It was really nice talking to you, and I hope this session is really helpful for most of them. And like Nadeem mentioned, I'm available on LinkedIn, and if any of you have any further questions or anything you would like to discuss, feel free to reach out to me, and definitely, I would probably. If I have the answer, I will probably give it to you. If not, probably I will direct you to someone who will probably give you a good answer for it.
Awesome, great. Thank you,
Awesome.
Karthik. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Okay.
That's really a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.